Good morning, Millis High School. The speaker in this seminar is Jordan Burnham. Jordan is a public speaker who discusses the mental health issues and disorders that affect so many of us. He is a survivor of a suicide attempt during his senior year in high school, and he shares this powerful story of fighting depression and finding recovery. In 2008, he addressed a congressional briefing on Capitol Hill, and in 2013, he was invited to the White House for the National Conference on Mental Health, hosted by President Obama. Jordan has received numerous accolades for his work in mental health advocacy and has been profiled by Sports Illustrated, People Magazine, and USA Today. He has been speaking on his story and mental health all over the country for years. He's spoken in 32 different states and 3 different countries. His presentation is meant to inspire, educate, and allow others to know that they're not alone. And he's actually speaking to us today from Philadelphia. We feel
I don't know.
We feel very fortunate to have Jordan here with us. And following his presentation, if any of you are concerned about yourself or someone else, please reach out to one of the counselors at the high school. We are always here to offer support and to help anyone who needs it. And so without further ado, here's our speaker, Jordan Burnham.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Happy to have you here. This is super normal, right? So welcome to my living room. My cats Penny and Lily. We're both we're all happy to have you and as a guest. And so yeah, my name is Jordan. I speak for this organization called Minding Your Mind. And normally, what we do at Minding Your Mind is go into middle schools, high schools, colleges. We share our stories and speak on the subject of mental health. So what you're going to hear me talk about today, besides just me, just my story, are mental health issues and my mental health disorder. So I usually speak for about 25-ish minutes. And then afterwards, I would love to answer any and all questions you might have about the story, mental health, any advice I can give. So I guess I'll start my story off with where I'm originally from, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So growing up, I had my mom and dad who both worked in school districts, and then my sister Tara, who is 5 years older than me. So growing up, my sister and I got to attend a private school because that's where my dad worked. And it was great because it was a small school. Everyone got along. It was like being in one big family. But in third grade, my dad gets a new job, meaning now we have to go from private to public school. And I'm thinking the transition will be an easy one. I'll get there, I'll gain new friends, I'll fit right in. But I get there, couldn't have been any more different. I was made fun of for the way that I talk, the way that I dress. I was told that I talk too proper, that I dress too preppy. I got picked on. I got beat up by this one kid whose name I won't say because that would be petty and unprofessional, Stacey Evans. And so when I got home at the end of the day, I would talk to my sister because she was going through the same type of problems, the same type of issues. So when I got home after school, it's like my sister became my therapist and I became hers because she could relate to everything I was going through, vice versa. And that's how we became close, best friends, going through elementary school into middle school. Now, besides talking to my sister, I got by with three different things whenever I was going through a tough time. These are my healthy coping skills. And the first is sports. I love to watch, love to play sports. I played basketball, baseball, but to this day, my favorite sport, my best sport is golf. I think about taking this slide out all the time because who shoots a basketball like that? It's just such an awkward. I feel like the photographer was like, "Hey man, do you know how to shoot a basketball?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Cool, pretend like you don't." And that's how we get awkward 8th grade photos. Second thing was I was always a class clown. Love being able to make people laugh. The third thing is I've always been a social person. So I like trying to meet new people, gain friends and start friendships, which gave me a little acceptance that going into middle school I finally felt comfortable in my environment, the people around me, the friends around me. But seventh grade comes around and two major things happen. The first was my sister goes off to college. And I was happy for her. I was proud of her. She got an academic scholarship to Penn State University. Now, even though I was really happy for her and proud of her, it's a great school. That's my best friend leaving. I don't know who to talk to now whenever I'm having a bad day. Who's going to be that one person I can go and vent to? I don't have my best friend anymore. The second major thing that happens is my dad goes to interview for a job at a high school outside of Philadelphia. So he gets that job, and in the middle of seventh grade, I have to switch schools again. And I was hoping this time it would be different. I'd get there, I'd gain friends, I'd fit right in, but it was pretty much the same thing all over again. Made fun of for the way that I talk, the way that I dress. I think that time it was more so just being the new kid. But the main difference is that my sister isn't there after school to talk about what I'm going through. So this was the first time I kept any depressed, lonely thoughts to myself. I didn't talk about it. And we had a school counselor at my middle school. She had her own office. You could go there whenever you wanted. But I thought you only talked to a therapist or a counselor in an extreme situation, like someone close to you passing away or your parents going through a divorce. I didn't know I could walk into her office and just say, "Hey, I'm having a bad week. Can we please talk about it?" So I shied away from her office. But going through seventh and eighth grade, I was able to tell jokes, play sports, gain some friends. That going into ninth grade, I was voted class president, which is something I should have been happy, proud of. But at the same time, I feel like I'm in a community, but I'm not really a part of one because I'm going to school with a mask on my face, hiding the fact that I feel depressed, I feel lonely, and I feel like I don't belong. I'm going to school with fake smiles, fake laughs. So I figured the people around me that call themselves friends, maybe they were fake too, because they didn't understand the true me, the true Jordan, and what I was going through. But I get to ninth grade, get to high school, and ninth grade was a weird transition for me. So it was the first time I started doing a lot of different things. So, first time I started trying to impress and please other people instead of just making myself happy, dressing a certain way, hang out with certain groups of people, going to parties just to fit in. Ninth grade was also the first time that I started to drink. And I didn't drink just to get drunk for no reason. I drank because that was the one time me and my guy friends could talk about something real other than girls or sports. That was the first negative coping mechanism I picked up while I was in high school. Because as a guy, I would never talk about my feelings or my emotions while I was sober. I would never talk about feeling sad or feeling depressed while I was sober. But as a guy, I felt like I could open up and talk about anything while we were drinking, especially by the time we were drunk. So I thought that was the only way to cope or talk about whatever I was going through. Ninth grade was also the first time that I started to see my grades slip. Couldn't figure out why I could never pay attention in class, why I felt like I was 10 steps behind everyone else. I lacked motivation, excuse me, motivation to even get up and go to school, but I couldn't figure out why. 10th grade comes around, and that was the first time my parents said, "We think you should go see a therapist." In my mind, I didn't want to go because I was 16 at that time. And I figured anything I'm going through, I can talk to my girlfriend about it, play sports and forget about it, go to a party, drink. I figured there was no reason for me to go see a therapist. But my mom's the one who talked me into going. And I remember the first time I entered a therapist's office, I was very judgmental because I really didn't want to be there. So I'm looking this lady up and down, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, how could she ever understand what it's like for me, a 16-year-old black male going through high school? And why would I ever share with her my thoughts, my feelings, when she can never understand or relate to me, especially not like my sister could? Took time to not only find the right therapist, I think I switched twice that year, so I finally felt comfortable with who I was talking to. And even once I found that right therapist that I stuck with throughout high school, it still probably took 2 or 3 months to get used to talk therapy. Having someone help me process my mental health issues was just something I wasn't used to at that point. That year, I was 16 and I was diagnosed with depression. Oh, we're going, there we go. Depression. And so I didn't know what that meant because I didn't know what the difference was between feeling depressed and now actually having depression. And the best way that I try and explain it for me is that anyone at any given point in time can feel depressed, but more times that person knows what they're depressed about. So maybe it's the anniversary of something that's very saddening, going through a difficult time in school, going through a bad breakup, any and all things global pandemic related. But that person knows why they're crying. They know why they don't feel like themselves. They know why they don't want to get out of bed. They know why they're depressed. But someone like me who has depression, I can wake up one day and have no idea why I feel so sad, why I don't want to wake up and get out of bed, why I'm crying for no reason, depressed for no reason. Sometimes it's frustrating, and it's not whether I'm going to wake up having depression or not. It's just what level am I on emotionally because of my depression. One or two is saying I feel so low, I'm thinking about suicide, taking my own life. 9 or 10 is saying today's a good day, but what's tomorrow going to be like? I had a very negative, pessimistic way of viewing the world once I was diagnosed with depression because I thought that's how I had to be. Now, when I was diagnosed with depression, I thought that's what defined me. I thought it was a label. And so I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to be judged. And I didn't take it seriously. I was prescribed medication, but I wouldn't take it on a consistent basis. I would lie to my therapist to get out of her office as quick as possible. And I was still using alcohol as an outlet to talk about whatever I was going through. That's something that really hindered me going into my junior year of high school. So going into that year, I felt a lot of pressure because one of the first things I heard when I got to high school was that junior year is the most important year. When it comes to grades, when it comes to sports, it's the hardest year. And I hated that pressure because of my sister. Tara was valedictorian of her class, straight A's, perfect student, scholarship to Penn State. I thought I had to live up to everything she did. No one ever told me that. She never told me that. My parents never did. But I put this unfair pressure and stress on myself. So it has the opposite effect that I wanted to. And I'm struggling with my grades beginning of my junior year. Middle of that same year, I went through some problems and issues with my girlfriend at the time, with my friends. And I get to a level 4 or 5, not necessarily thinking about suicide or having a specific plan, but just questioning what life would be like for other people if I wasn't here. So one night I'm sitting at home, I'm sitting at my desk, and I take a bunch of pills. I pour them onto my desk. I pour a glass of water, and I just stare at those pills. And after a while, I pick up my phone and I call my girlfriend, and I told her, I'm staring at these pills, and I don't know if I'm going to take them or not, but I just need help. And I have no way of saying that to my parents or my therapist, but I just need help. She knew that second step was to call my parents. So she calls my parents. My door's locked and I won't open it. So my parents call the police. The police bust into my room to make sure I didn't take any of the pills. And even though I didn't take one pill, they look at my parents and say, "You have to take your son to a behavioral hospital." Automatically, I'm just thinking of padded walls, guys in straitjackets jumping around. But we pull up and it's a regular building. There's no padded walls. No one was in straitjackets. It's guys who look like me, dress like me, but going through way worse problems than I was. Guys are 14, 15, addicted to any drug you can name, already considered alcoholics, belong to gangs. I've seen family members, friends die right in front of them because of gang violence, have been physically abused since they were children, and here I am because I'm messing up in school and problems with my girlfriend. I figured there was no reason for us to be in the same room, let alone the same building. And I didn't understand. I didn't get it until our first therapy session. So because I was new, we got around a circle and it was about a dozen of us. Got around a circle, introduced ourselves, and basically said why we were there. And I'm listening, and everyone else has these sad, traumatic stories you can make movies out of. I'm embarrassed to even stand up and say why I'm there. I feel like my problems aren't big enough. My story isn't sad enough. So I'm the last to go by choice. And I sit up and I say, "Hi, my name's Jordan. I'm just here because I'm going through a rough time in school. I feel really guilty about things with my girlfriend and friends. I have depression. And honestly, some days I wake up just not wanting to be here, not wanting to be alive. But I'm sorry my story doesn't match up to any of yours." And once we were done, a therapist took me to the side and he said something to me I never really heard before. He said, "You don't need to minimize how you feel based on the severity of other people's problems. What you're going through, your experience is valid, just as valid as the person sitting next to you. You came here to cope with your problems and mental health issues, not compare them." That made sense to me because even though we were all there for different reasons, and even though their problems seemed way worse, bigger, more complicated than mine, we were all there to try and cope with those things in a healthier way. The most important lesson I learned being in there was that we can never choose the bad things that happen to us in our lives, but we can choose how we cope with them. And I'll never forget that week of being in there. The patients, their names, their stories, the therapists I got to talk to. After a week, emotionally, mentally, I felt strong enough to go back to the real world, go back to my junior year. But I get there and it's a terrible transition all over again. Main reason was because I was safeguarded from anything that could harm me emotionally while I was in that hospital. There's no cell phone, so there's no texting, calling, any drama with my friends or girlfriend. I didn't have to worry about tests, quizzes, homework. So now I'm exposed to all my stressors all at once, but I didn't feel like I had an outlet to talk about it. Because in there, it was understood we all had problems. We all had issues. That's why we were there. But we sat down in a circle and we discussed that. We didn't need alcohol to open up and be vulnerable. There were things I could tell complete strangers I just met that I couldn't even tell some of my best friends that I'd known for years. And so I fell right back into this mist of depression saying, why talk about how I feel when no one truly cares or understands? Junior year was also the first few times I got caught drinking by my parents. And right before my senior year started, my parents went off on a trip. I throw a party for me and my friends. We're drinking, we get drunk, party gets busted by the police, and I have to call my dad to tell him what happened. And I'll never forget that phone call because I've never felt so guilty as his son. I'm telling him, Dad, I'm so sorry for letting you down yet again as your son, someone that should be making you happy and proud. All I do is disappoint you. But this time it felt 10 times worse because my dad is the athletic director at my high school. I put his job in jeopardy. There are people at the high school that wanted him fired because of my mistake. I took the weight of all of that, I put it on my shoulders. And by the time my senior year started, I was constantly having suicidal thoughts, not questioning whether I would do it or not, but going through a checklist of, well, if I did, how would I do it? Could I make it look like an accident? And the one thing I said over and over again was, I don't necessarily want to die, but the part of me that has depression, I want that part to die. The part of me that feels sadness, guilt, I want that part to die. And I would go to school with what I call the depressing playlist, and they were songs that talked about suicide, feeling depressed, sad, angry, and I would play it at the loudest volume. So even if someone yelled or screamed my name, I didn't have to hear it. I just wanted to be numb to the world. But the one good thing that happened, beginning of my senior year, I was making playoffs for golf, and that's something I was excited about. And I had to play a practice round. So my dad picked me up from school that day, and we're both excited on the car ride up. And I get there and I play one of the best rounds that I played all year. And I'm so excited to get back in the car and tell my dad all about it. But I look over at him and he looks really sad. So I asked him, Dad, what's wrong? He says, nothing, I'm just tired. I can understand that. He works at a high school, it's late in the day. I can understand why he might be a little exhausted. So we get home and I reminded him, Dad, my car's at school. We have to go pick it up. He said, no, just go upstairs. Mom's waiting for you. Now I start to panic because my parents and I didn't have that type of relationship where they would just be waiting for me upstairs to see how my day was. We didn't communicate to that level. So I get upstairs, I look at my mom. She's on the couch and she looks like she's about to cry. So I asked her, Mom, what's wrong? She says, nothing, I'm just tired. And now my heart starts pounding, questioning, what did I do this time to upset my parents yet again? That's when my dad walked in with a duffel bag full of alcohol that I had hidden in the trunk of my car. And when he dropped that duffel bag in front of me, um, that was it for me in my mind, because here I am, their son, and all I do is disappoint them, make them angry, upset. I can tell by the expression on their faces. They don't even want me to be their son anymore. What's the point in being here if I can't make my mom, my dad, my sister, if I can't make anyone happy, what's the point in being here? That was a night that, excuse me, I attempted to take my own life by going out of my 9-story bedroom window. When I hit the ground 100 feet below, I broke my left fibula, I broke my left tibia, I shattered my left femur, I broke my pelvis, I broke my jaw in 4 different places, broke my left wrist, had fractures to my skull. I was bleeding internally from my brain and my organs. When I was flown to the hospital that night, my parents were told I had less than 24 hours to live. 24 hours go by, I'm given 48 hours to live. 48 hours go by, I'm given a 40% chance to live. It wasn't until the fifth day my parents were at the hospital that they were told I was going to survive, but it would be a long physical recovery. I was reduced into a coma for 5 days. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks. And I still don't remember one moment of being in that ICU. But I remember when I finally came to and I realized I was in a hospital, I was just trying to figure out what's going on. First thing I noticed is this feeding tube going down my nose. I touch my throat. There's this tube, this trach in my throat, so I can't talk. I literally have no voice. Still rods coming out of my left leg. My left wrist is wrapped up like I'm about to go into a boxing match. IV in my arm, hooked up to 3 different monitors, and I have no idea why I'm there. To this day, I don't remember going out my window. I remember everything else leading up to that event. I remember my physics class that morning, every hole of golfing that day, the car ride home with my dad, but going out the window, I don't remember. And this was impulsive. I didn't plan my suicide attempt. That was a Friday that started out just like any other Friday of high school. I didn't wake up that morning thinking this is the day I'm going to attempt suicide. But for whatever reason, when my dad dropped that duffel bag full of alcohol, there was something in my brain saying, I don't belong here anymore. One night, my sister's visiting, and to this day, Tara and I remain very close, best friends. So I knew if there was one person that would tell me what happened and be honest, it was her. So one night, it's just us two in my hospital room, and I look over at her and I mouth to her. Because of the trach, I couldn't talk for 2.5 months. So I mouthed to her what happened. And she looks at me and she starts to get teary eyed. And she says, You went out of your window. There were so many thoughts and questions in my head, but the first is, That's impossible. I wouldn't survive a 9-story fall. Even if I did, how drunk was I to accidentally go out the window? Did someone drug me, push me out of my window? What happened? She said, No one was in the room and you were completely sober. The words and the thought suicide attempt didn't even come into my head at this point. Because, yeah, I knew I had thoughts of not wanting to be here, questioning what life would be like for other people if I wasn't here. But I never thought I would go through with those emotions, with those feelings, and have to lay in this hospital bed with no one else to blame but myself for something I went through with. So at that point, I didn't have to. I was willing to accept two things. One, physically, my body would never be the same after a 9-story fall. Now, that's just the reality of falling 100 feet and the injuries that come with that. The second thing was that this was a suicide attempt. And I think by being willing to accept both of those things at the same time helped me with the next decision I had to make while I was in the hospital. Because while I was in there was a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper, Michael Vitez, who asked my dad if he could interview me. And I know my mom didn't want to do this interview. She said no. My therapist thought it was a terrible idea, but they left it up to me. And I remember when my dad walked into my hospital room and starts talking to me about a reporter that he had just met named Michael Vitez, and he seems like a nice guy. And finally, he gets around to it and he asked me if I would do this interview, if I would tell my story for the first time. And I said yes almost immediately within that first conversation. Because at that point, I'm the 18-year-old senior in high school, supposed to be running around with all my friends, enjoying my senior year. But at that point, I'm the 18-year-old senior in high school. I'm down to 80 pounds. I can't move. I can't talk. I've been told by doctor after doctor that I would never walk again, that I would never get out of a hospital bed. So I figured by literally spelling out every single word of that interview on an alphabet chart, people on the outside of the hospital can touch the words I don't have a voice to say. So whoever reads this article, whoever hears about this story, is never in the position that I'm at right now, lying in this hospital bed. The story came out in January of 2008, and it was incredible to hear feedback from people who thanked my family for sharing this story. But at the same time, this isn't how I pictured spending my senior year of high school. Something I'll look forward to from day one of getting to high school. And there are moments, there's times where it's still tough to look back at that senior year, knowing that's something I can never get back due to the repercussions of the suicide attempt. But it's been just over, let's say, 13 years now since this happened. And the obvious question is, how am I doing today? I feel great doing what I am today. Obviously, it looks a lot different. I miss the being in person presentations because not just for the engagement as far as doing the presentation itself, being in front of a live audience, but my favorite part of my job is the listening. The conversations I get to have with people after the presentation. Because as much as I love using my voice and sharing my story, I love listening to others and their experiences and how they can relate to the story in some way. So I still feel very passionate though about sharing my story, even if it does look a little different. Hopes to make a difference and hopes to inspire other young adults to tell their stories as well. Um, my one of my last presentations before everything shut down was an evening presentation. And so I invited my wife because I had changed a few things with the slides and transitions. And I always love giving her feedback, and she doesn't get to hear me speak very often. So I invited her and I asked her what she thought on the car ride home. And she said, Oh, I loved it. I love the new things you did with the slides and oh my, it was perfect. Don't change a thing. It's like, oh, wonderful. Went to bed, woke up the next morning. We're sitting at breakfast And out of nowhere, she says, I'm starting to think you don't love our cats because I couldn't help but notice when I woke up this morning that you don't have our cats in any of your slides. It's not a big deal. Enjoy your pancakes. I just wanted to point out. Uh, so Lily is the OG of the family. She just turned 9. She's on the left here, and it was a fun birthday party we got to have because my wife and I had cake, and I think she was happy. So yeah, Lily is my favorite person to work next to because she's either doing this, pitching some really good ideas and jokes, or snoring, which is always great when the microphone picks that up. And then little Penny is over here on my right side and down here. Penny's a ball of energy. She is 1. And so she developed this howling thing during the quarantine, which has been great because I work from home all day. Um, but and she knocked a few things over, and that's why I was anyway. There's nothing and there's no one that makes me laugh more than Penny. So I love having her around too. So I think having the pet therapy, working from home every day, has been a lot of fun. Created some difficulties, but yeah, I love her. So I'm glad that I included this in the presentation. My parents and I have a much better relationship when it comes to me opening up about my mental health, allowing them to be a part of my support system, was just something I didn't do, back when I was in high school. My sister Tara, like I said, I consider her my best friend to this day. And thanks to her and her husband, Dan, we now have my niece, Madison, over there on the right, who's 5, going on 15. And then little Hudson, over here on the left, he just turned 2 back, I guess, last July. He turned 2. And so I was very, very fortunate to see them for the first time during everything. I guess that was 3 months ago. I get to visit them, and it was awesome because Madison, her personality, she's just really growing into that, which is great to see. And then little Huddy, I mean, he was a child the last time I saw him. Now he's a grown man using sentences and words. He knows how to be funny. So I was glad to be able to see them, and all of this goes into my support system and the people that mean the most to me and the things I love. So I love my job. I feel very fortunate to have my job and to be able to use my voice. I love my family, wife, cats. I'm very fortunate to have all of these things in my life, but I still have depression. It's not a cold that goes away after a couple weeks after taking some medicine and seeing a doctor. Now, it's still something I deal and cope with, but deal and cope with in a much better way. I still talk to my therapist on a regular basis. I still take medication on a daily basis, but there's a whole wide range of tools that go into how I cope with my mental health on a daily basis. So journaling I really love because and I don't write pages upon pages. Sometimes it's just a paragraph simply stating, here's what happened today, here's how I'm feeling, and here's how I cope with it. Because I think sometimes we don't realize the things that we've been through in life. And sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for how we cope with it during that time period and also how much progress we've made since. So I like being able to journal for those reasons. FaceTiming with friends, there's no substance to our conversations. They're just so dumb. But I love being able to FaceTime with them, group text throughout the day. Again, there's just nothing as substance. My friends, we just do like top 5 of everything, and I don't know. But I love being able to have that kind of communication with them. Sims 4, I think my wife plays Sim. She plays Sims 4 a little more than I do, but we like to compare our storylines and our builds, and so that's always fun. NBA 2K, I don't think I play NBA 2K too much. Um, who's to say how many hours or too many hours dedicated to your team practice and exercise is really great. I like being able to go for my sometimes I just go for like a 10-15 minute walk. I'll be happy to give kind of an update physically of where things are today, but 10-15 minute walks are okay. It's definitely harder for me to walk any longer than that. My back gets a little sore and it's not very comfortable, but I still like being able to do that just to get out of the house and just to be able to be outside is something that's important. So I love exercising. Meditation I do every morning. Podcast I love listening to. The listening to rap music, I got in tr- I got in trouble because we live in an apartment complex and like everyone's working from home. And so what I found out and what I got in trouble for is that not everyone enjoys listening to loud rap music at 8 in the morning to get ready for a presentation. It's like, whatever, man. And I know who said it. Like I do. And it's just like, and you're probably thinking, Jordan, did you just not listen to loud rap music and like just leave it there and be mature and move on? No, I didn't, because I did a test. I played jazz music just as loud as the rap music, no complaints. So apparently, no one in our apartment complex has any idea what good music is. So whatever. I really have no idea how to end the virtual presentation because this is just not normal and it's weird. And I always hope that people get something out of my story, even if it's just one or two things that you can apply to yourself, to someone you know. I think uh, during this story, there's a theme of who to talk to, of having the opportunity to talk to someone that I didn't take advantage of. So, starting from the time my sister went to college, and I think about the school counselor that was in middle school, I didn't take advantage of being able to talk to her. When I got to high school, I didn't take advantage of the opportunity to really actually be honest with my therapist and take my medication and take my therapy seriously. There are many opportunities. The behavioral hospital, I was still shy and hesitant to open up while I was there and trying to cope with my mental health. And so during this entire story, there's so many opportunities for me to open up and to communicate to someone, this is how I'm feeling and that I need help. So I hope that if there's one or two things that you're able to get out of this presentation, out of my story, it's that how important it is to have these conversations, because the suicide attempt didn't just happen because of that duffel bag full of alcohol that my dad put in front of me. There's a series of events that go into it. And the biggest one is not reaching out and asking for help and talking to someone. So I encourage everyone, um, right now, especially, to be able to talk to whoever it may be, whether that's the school counselor, whether that's friends, whether that's parents. I know sometimes it can be hard to talk to parents who don't understand or won't acknowledge everything mental health wise. But I think it's really important to be able to communicate to people how you're feeling, and how people can assist you and help you and support you during this time period. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I'll leave it there. I I appreciate all of you for listening and allowing me to share my story. This is so I have no like to go from speaking in person to then staring at a webcam throughout the day has been a really interesting transition. But I hope that all of you were able to enjoy this presentation and the hanging in there with me during this. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now because I would love to answer questions or I would love to give any feedback that I can give or any advice I can give. So thank you again. I'm gonna stop saying words because that'll be it. Thank you.
But thank you, Jordan. That was excellent. And Mrs. Sullivan, I think, is just giving everybody a minute to ask questions, and then
Oops.
if you're okay with answering questions, then I will read them to you when
Yeah,
when
sure.
it's given to me. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
It's much less fun than being like in an auditorium actually with the people and being able to ask direct questions. So sorry for the awkward pause, everybody.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's we're all just workshopping and just trying to go with things as best we can and trying to make
Right,
adjustments, even if we
right.
don't understand them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right now we're also just happy that we've made it through this entire presentation without it shutting down on us, other than that whole beginning thing. So things are going well.
Um, my whole setup here is all because of things not going well. So yeah, that's definitely trial and error is a big part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
And how would you concretely like what do you first say? Like how do you open that conversation?
Okay, so somebody is asking if someone wanted to go and reach out for help, like what do you even say? How do you even start the conversation with a counselor or with a parent or with a friend? Like what do you say?
Yeah, so I think what's kind of important is the saying how you're feeling and how it is affecting you. Because sometimes someone might, like how I mentioned, that someone can feel depressed, and sometimes they know the reason as to why. But some people can feel sad and just not feel like themselves and not know the distinct reason. And sometimes that holds people back from seeking help because it's hard to communicate that and articulate that to someone. But I think if you are able to say, "This is how I'm feeling," um, this is what the effect that it's having on me, and maybe this is the support that I would love, or if I would be able to just talk to you about some of these things, that would be great. But it's all about that first initial conversation, and it's not a comfortable one. I would never ever sit here and say that talking to a counselor and opening up is easy, because it's not. It's not something that I was used to doing back when I was in school, and it took some time even to get used to it. But I think just by taking that first step of being comfortable and having that conversation, which can take some time, but basically saying how you're feeling and maybe how you can best be supported in that moment in time. Because the thing with talking to a counselor is, when I'm talking to a friend and I need to vent, I say that to my friends because a lot of times someone else you're talking to who isn't a counselor might be just waiting for their turn to talk or trying to give the best advice and feedback that they can. But with a counselor, they're there to listen and they're there to give the feedback that you might need for your mental health. So I think that's why it's really important to be able to reach out if you're able to.
Awesome. Thank you.
And someone else was asking, what kinds of things have you done like that have helped besides going to counseling in his life? Like, I think like probably they're asking about the coping strategies. Like what kind of things does he use that are effective?
And somebody asked, what are your favorite like coping strategies and other things that you do to help yourself other than going to a counselor?
Yeah. I would say writing is something that I really enjoy. I like being able to kind of going back to that journaling part of it because yeah, it's always great to be able to communicate to people and it's great to be able to talk out loud. But at the same time, sometimes I just like writing and getting out of my own head in that way by just sitting at a computer and just typing something, especially how I'm feeling about a certain situation. I like being able to do that. The meditation thing is huge. And I don't meditate for it's like 5 to 10 minutes at the most. And I was not for meditation when I first started. I couldn't. It's like I have too much like stuff to get done to meditate. One, and two, I can't stop thinking about those things in order to meditate. But I think that's one of those things. That's why they call it like practicing mindfulness and practicing meditation, because it does take time to be able to feel comfortable in doing that. But meditation is something that's huge with me. And then I think there's just little things throughout the day that I try and use. If I'm sitting at a computer, and this will happen for maybe editing a podcast or working on a project. If I'm sitting at a computer for longer than an hour, I try and take 10-minute breaks each hour to do something that maybe it's my favorite YouTube video, maybe it's my favorite song, maybe it's just my favorite video that I want to watch. I don't know if you can keep going on TikTok within 10 minutes. I think that's kind of impossible. But anything that I can do to just make myself laugh or just give myself kind of that break from reality and stress of life, that's something that's really important for me too. Because of sitting here and looking at a computer, I like to break up my day in that way too. Um, so yeah, and then therapy, medication, and then I mean the things that seem like the video game thing and the Sims for a lot of that goes into my mental health because it allows me to do something fun outside of just this. And that's my favorite word whenever I'm talking about how I cope, it's balance, because it's a balance of all different types of things that go into how I cope on a daily basis. So yeah, I would say there's little things throughout the day I try and use.
Okay, and it seems like one of the really hard things that you went to that was a major trigger for you was switching schools, and that this person is asking if you have any suggestions for people who are starting at a new school, things for them to do that would help them transition or cope with that difficult transition.
Well, now I don't know if I have the best advice for now, but I know, when I first got to a school, so like humor was one of those things that I try to use just to kind of break the ice. And even when I was in elementary school, part of the reason why I would use humor and tell jokes was to get people to like me or also to open up and accept me. And so that was part of it. But I think when I switched schools the second time when I was in middle school, that's probably why I leaned on being social and trying different things like playing sports. I think that was a big part of it, was just so I can meet other people, just so I could feel like I was a part of something being at that school. And that's why I say right now that definitely is something that is hard to do. But I think being able to get involved in any club activity that you're able to, that opens up the door to meeting at least some people and then kind of going from there. But yeah, that's a really hard thing. I think the other thing that helped me when I was in middle school is my boy Andre, actually, and we're best friends still. Actually got to that school the same year that I did, and he was new, and so that was kind of the reason why we became so close and are still close to this day, is because he was going through that same type of transition. So I feel like whenever you're able to have that person to reach out to who might be able to um, relate to your experience, I think that can be really helpful. But I think the getting involved in activities, part of it is crucial as far as like trying to meet people.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad this next person asked this. So it sounds like the person who asked this question is struggling with depression and has started, or is in the process of being in counseling and taking medication and still isn't feeling good, and it's really hard for them. Can you speak to kind of like what to do in that scenario, or was it instant for you that you started to feel better? Was it did it take some time, and sort of how to cope with, I don't know, if you feel like you've started those things, but it's not helping, what would you recommend?
Yeah. A lot of it is trial and error in the beginning. I mean, when it comes to finding the right therapist, I switched twice. When it came to medication, I switched several times or gone up and down in dosage. Like it's all a process. And like that's why I always say, like, I'll never be recovered emotionally, mentally, physically from the suicide attempt. I'm always in recovery. So the things that I do to take care of my mental health, I try and stay consistent with that. And I'm still going to have bad days. I'm still going to go through difficult phases, but I still try and stay consistent with who I'm talking to and my support system and coping skills. That took time. That's just that. I mean, that's especially just being younger and being like, it takes time to really feel comfortable and reaching out. It takes time. Like, I'm to this day, I'm learning new things about myself and depression. Like, I didn't, during this time period, during the quarantine, there are things about my depression that I didn't necessarily understand as far as how it's best for me to be supported with my depression. How I was going to gain new skills because of having to isolate and not being able to get out and be around people. There were things that I had to kind of adjust. And sometimes that can be a little frustrating and that can be a little confusing as well. But it really does take time to be able to get comfortable with that. Everything that I talked about today is because of trial and error. There are different coping skills that I use for different periods, but it was always just trying to stay consistent with trying to have myself at a healthy emotional balance. And that was with therapy, that was with medication, and that was through coping skills that were strengthened over time, but it's still a learning process for me. And I always look at taking care of my mental health as kind of just investing in that, so that today, what I'm doing today for my mental health may not like help me immediately in that moment. But if I'm going through something in a week from now, because of taking care of myself today, I might be in a better position to kind of cope with that during that moment in time. So, what I would say is that it's not easy. It does take some time to understand yourself, to understand how you can best be supported. But I would definitely encourage to stay with that process because it's something that can really benefit you.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I think that's really important to hear, that it's not necessarily easy or fast, but it's worth it, and it's something you kind of have to maintain. Somebody asked, what could your parents and other adults do to like support you and help you when you're struggling with these things? Like if somebody wanted to ask their parents for help, what might they ask for?
Um, so yeah, when trying to talk to parents for help, so I always, my friends and I do this, and my parents and I we do this as well. we have this rule where we say at the very beginning, is this a share or do you want advice? And what I wish I would have, looking back, what I would have done differently with my parents is said, um, I just need to vent and I just need to share how I'm feeling. I don't need advice in this moment in time. It's not like I'm looking for an answer, and I'm sure there is some type of solution to maybe what I'm going through. But I just need to vent and get this off my chest and be able to communicate this to you so you know what I'm going through. That's probably the one thing I wish I probably would have done differently, looking back. And that's not always parents like for parents to hear that is not always the easiest because I think parents naturally want to give advice and wanting to ease the situation and trying to, sometimes you have to sit in emotions that aren't comfortable. You can't force someone out of being sad. You can't force someone out of feeling the way that they do. And I think for sometimes my parents and other parents, it's always this, okay, well, you don't have it as bad as this person, or things will be okay. Things will be perfectly fine. You'll see. And I think that me, in moment in time, looking back in high school, I needed help then and I couldn't look in the future. But a lot of times my parents were saying, yeah, but you'll get through this. You'll see one day. And they're trying to give me hope by talking about the future. But sometimes I just needed to stay in that moment in the present and sit in those emotions and not be forced out of those emotions. And so I think that's why it's so important to not only talk about how you're feeling, but also say, here are the things that benefit me when you're listening, and here are the things that aren't so great as far as communication and me getting help that I need.
Awesome. Thank you.
Um,
I like this question too. So, what could the people around you have done to make you feel more comfortable opening up?
Yeah, great question. Um, I think it's a culture. I think it's a societal and it's a culture thing. And I think we are in a different culture and society now where, I can go on YouTube and just watch people talk about mental health and talk about their stories. I could click on a hashtag on Twitter or Instagram and I can see people talking about their stories. I didn't have that. I didn't know other people had a story that was similar to mine. I didn't know one kid in my high school that had a mental health disorder. No one ever talked about that they were only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep. No one talked about anxiety or just stress as a whole. And so I thought I was the only one going through what I was. So I would say if there's one thing that could have been different looking back at high school, I think just having a young adult speaker, just having a speaker in general, would have been great for me to hear and for my school to hear, just so that other people can say, all right, here's someone who has a mental health disorder. Here's what they went through and coming out on the other side of it. But here's how they take care of their mental health today. Because one, I feel like I wouldn't have felt alone in that moment in time. But two, it probably would have opened up the conversations that I had with people after my suicide attempt that I wish I would have had before. Of the people I went to middle school and high school with who were going through a lot of mental health issues, but didn't open up and didn't talk to me about it. So I wish looking back that we just had at our school just a different culture when it came to having a conversation about mental health and just the communication. There was just no communication. Even like our school counselor, no one ever pointed out we had a school counselor in any of the assemblies that we had. And I didn't know we had one in high school until I got back from the behavioral hospital. So I'm glad that we're going in the direction that we are as far as being able to hear stories and people feeling like they can open up and talk. But the getting help part of it is crucial. And so that both of those things I wish was different looking back in high school.
comment.
Okay.
So, like, at the top. Someone just wanted to really appreciate.
Oh, someone just wants you to know that they appreciate how you said not to think that your issues are less because they might not be as bad as somebody else's.
So they just wanted him to know that.
I think,
Oh,
sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, that's yeah, that's a big thing with me. I've learned to kind of compare myself to myself instead of other people, especially like during the pandemic. That during all of this. It's very easy to compare ourselves to other people as far as how we're spending our time, projects that we're working on, what someone else might be going through. I think it's really important to know that your experience is valid and that it's important to talk about, because as soon as you feel as though your experience is invalidated, then it's really hard to open up and communicate that to other people. So I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that.
Okay, and then just one more question, and I think we have to wrap it up soon, but this is the relate thing?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Okay, so this person just wants to say that they relate to this and they've been in and out of programs and hospitals. Do you have any advice for moving on from your past? Or does it never really go away?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think with your past, the thing about our past is that it makes us like who we are today, and it strengthens who we are today. And it's easy to look back at some of the things that we had been through and think, man, what a sad period in life. What a really difficult period in my life. But I always look at the past as adversity. And I think that the things that we go through in our past make us resilient in a way that allows us to cope or think about things a little differently. So the things that I've been through in life, my past, I think about it, it just gives me a different perspective now. It does give me kind of that resilience to be able to speak up and talk about a lot of the issues that I've been through. And the thing about our past too, when we talk about these things, is that you never know who you're affecting and who you're helping by being open about this. So it's always a process. It's always day to day. And it's always something that I try and stay consistent with every single day. What I would say is that working on yourself and taking care of your mental health is the best thing that you can do as far as moving forward. So I would say that the struggles that you're going through today, look at that as an avenue for adversity and taking that resilience moving forward and creating even a better or strengthened way to take care of your mental health because of your experiences. But please stay with it, because that's so crucial and beneficial to you.
Absolutely.
Jordan, thank you so much. We so appreciate your time and your willingness to share your story with all of us.
Yeah, and if we can just also reiterate to the kids that if you guys are worried about yourselves or a friend, counselors, we're here and we want you guys to reach out to us. But Jordan, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay.
Oh, he's so cute. That was like